The truest healing isn't about fixing yourself, but about understanding yourself. It's a subtle shift, a crossing of the threshold from fragmentation to wholeness. Trying to fix what's broken assumes something's fundamentally wrong, that the pieces of you need rearranging, polishing, conforming to some imagined ideal. But understanding dawns when you realize nothing's broken in the way you thought. You discover a multitude of truths within, a tapestry of selves, voices loud and hushed, perspectives at odds, yet all interwoven into a single psyche yearning for integration. This journey starts with making peace with paradox. The compulsive need to choose one part of yourself over another dissolves. You can be strong and deeply sad, brave and terrified, forgiving, yet still feel the sting of past hurts. These contradictions aren't flaws to eradicate, they're threads in a larger pattern, each essential, each belonging. A quiet dignity returns, the inner wall softens. You don't silence the voices, you listen. And as you do, they speak with greater clarity, more truth. We're conditioned to believe healing means resolution. Sadness vanishes, anger dissipates, fear disappears. But integration isn't about elimination. It's about embracing. It gathers the exiled emotions, the neglected desires, the rejected memories and whispers. You belong here. Even the parts you've made mistakes with, the parts you've been ashamed of, find a place at the table. What a miracle when you no longer need to hide from yourself, when you can gaze into your depths and say, "Yes, I see you and I'm still whole." These moments of quietude when things don't go your way are revealing. Instead of despair or self-recrimination, you pause. You feel the pull of old reactions, but a witness emerges, not coldly judgmental, but with compassion. The part of you that used to seize control and pain no longer scrambles for attention, it's heard. In that listening, it softens. What was reflexive becomes a choice. Burden becomes message. Chaos becomes insight. Inner contradictions will still surface. Conflicting desires will still dance. Light and shadow will still intertwine. But you no longer amputate parts of yourself for simplicity's sake. You stop forcing resolution. You sit with the paradox, breathe with it, even honor it. The psyche isn't a machine to optimize. It's a living organism with rhythms, instincts, and depth that surpass the superficial. Integration is remembering the soul isn't singular. It's multifaceted. Each part speaks its own language, holds its own wisdom. What felt chaotic becomes an internal ecology. Everything has its place. Anger, once explosive or suppressed, signals something vital needing protection. Fear, once paralyzing, highlights proximity to something sacred, something unknown. Sadness, once overwhelming, becomes a wellspring of tenderness. You no longer flee these states, you walk with them. They aren't obstacles, they're the path. This isn't the end of healing, it's the beginning of true healing. Only when you stop judging your contradictions do you find peace. Only when you stop striving to be one thing do you become all that you are. You discover you can be weary yet persevere, insecure yet decisive, broken yet sacred. This isn't a cognitive understanding, it's an embodied truth. You treat yourself differently, not with indulgence, but with reverence. You stop demanding clarity where mystery resides. You stop forcing wholeness and begin inviting it. You become less interested in being right and more curious about being real. You shift from asking, "What should I be feeling?" to, "What is this feeling trying to show me?" You become your own companion, your own guide. You become trustworthy to yourself. Healing through integration isn't the absence of pain, but the end of war within. Things that once overwhelmed you begin to shift in meaning. Unbearable emotions hijack thoughts, internal chaos. They don't disappear, but speak a new language. What felt like an attack now seems like a message. This isn't through control or suppression. It emerges when you turn toward, rather than away from, your inner life. Your triggers no longer control you. They reveal you. When pain arises, instead of the usual panic, guilt, or collapse, you pause. That pause is inner freedom. You're no longer wholly identified with the wound. You're witnessing it, relating to it, not from it. This is monumental. It's the beginning of a conscious relationship with your psyche. When fragmented, our pain controls us. We confuse it with our identity. We lash out or shut down not because we're inherently flawed, but because we're still surviving an injury that never healed. Triggers aren't the problem. They're residue of unresolved issues. Fragments of meaning buried deep, awaiting recognition. When triggered, it's not failure. It's a sign of life, of something trying to speak. Integration doesn't eliminate triggers. It invites curiosity. Instead of shame or defensiveness, ask, what part of me is speaking now? What memory is this pain linked to? What is this reaction protecting? This is self-compassion. You're inviting the unconscious to speak, and it will. You may find anger protecting innocence, jealousy masking sadness, numbness a survival mechanism from a time when feeling too much would have destroyed you. When emotional reactions become meaningful, expressions of something true, sacred, unfinished, you stop fearing them. Your psyche isn't betraying you. It's trying to protect, alert, bring something important to consciousness. This shift from fear to curiosity, shame to understanding, is the heart of integrative healing. You become less reactive not through better behavior, but through deeper relationship. You're not controlling the storm. You're listening to the thunder. Sometimes listening is enough. A feeling that once consumed you can now arise, be named, and dissolve without needing to be acted upon. This isn't detachment, it's presence, intimacy with your experience. Setbacks will occur, old patterns will resurface, reactions will surprise you. But something's different. You recover faster, reflect with more kindness, ask better questions. You don't spiral into self-hatred. You acknowledge, this is a place I haven't fully known in myself yet. That recognition is healing. You're working with your inner world, not against it. A new rhythm emerges. Things that once provoked you lose their power. Situations that once left you feeling small or helpless invite deeper understanding. You don't just survive emotional storms, you emerge wiser. You trust your reactions are rooted in history, memory, meaning. This trust allows you to soften, to move through life with grace, not because you've mastered your emotions, but because you've befriended them. You stop fearing the hurting parts of you. You stop seeing emotional responses as signs of failure. You recognize them as invitations, inner calls to remember, to care, to integrate. As you accept these invitations, you become less afraid of yourself. You move through the world with greater integrity because you're no longer separating from your own truth. Even the most painful reactions become opportunities for return to self. You heal not because life no longer stirs your pain, but because you're finally hearing what the pain is trying to teach. A pivotal moment arises when you realize Those you blamed for your pain weren't the source of your suffering. They were mirrors. Not because they were innocent or justified, but because the intensity they evoked wasn't just about them. It was about what they touched within you. Something buried, forgotten, unloved. You stop projecting. You begin to reclaim. You no longer cast your shadow onto others to avoid confronting it within. You notice how you externalized what you couldn't contain. Anger at someone's selfishness was, in part, your own rejected assertiveness. Envy of someone's confidence masked your own silenced desire for visibility. Disgust at someone's weakness was fear of your own vulnerability, hidden beneath years of performance and strength. Early in healing, we look outward for what's wrong. Others become the problem. But integration shows us that what we can't tolerate in others often reveals what we haven't made peace with in ourselves. This isn't moral judgment. It's deep psychological truth. We project what we reject. We attribute to others the traits, emotions, and desires we can't yet bear to claim as our own. Reclaiming what we project isn't easy. It takes courage to look at someone you judge and ask, what part of me is reflected here? It takes humility to admit qualities you despise in others might also reside within, hidden beneath denial or shame. Only in this act of reclaiming do we return to ourselves. We stop cutting off parts of the psyche to preserve an illusion of purity or righteousness. We allow uncomfortable truths back in, to be held, understood, loved. People who once irritated, angered, or diminished you no longer carry the same weight. Their behavior might still be inappropriate, but it no longer unconsciously binds you. Why? Because you've brought the projection back. You've stopped asking them to carry something you were afraid to carry alone. This, more than anything, signals integration. You reclaim what's yours, not to shame yourself, but to become whole. The shadow isn't the enemy. It's the exiled part of you. Your anger, ambition, sexuality, sadness, desire for attention. These aren't flaws, they're energies. When separated and projected, they return distorted and painful. When reclaimed, they become inner strength, wisdom, vibrancy. We seed power by projecting. We see someone standing firm in their truth and feel threatened, not because they're wrong, but because they're doing something we haven't allowed ourselves to do. Or we fall in love, not just for who they are, but because they awaken a lost part of ourselves, a beauty, passion, playfulness we'd forgotten. When that love fades or becomes painful, we think we've lost something, but we haven't. We've lost the mirror. The task is to turn inward and find what was reflected and make it our own. This work of reclaiming isn't cold or analytical. It's an act of love, a return to full humanity. It softens your heart, not just for yourself, but for others. You see people more clearly, not through the lens of unmet needs, but through the truth of who they are. Even when boundaries are needed, it's not out of blame, but clarity. You no longer need others to carry what you now carry with grace. Stopping projection isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, seeing yourself more completely and loving what you see, even if it scares you. It's taking responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your inner world, the stories you tell yourself, the roles you assign others, the emotions you attribute to the external world that are actually trying to return to you. This is the quiet power of integration. It returns you to yourself. It gathers what was scattered. It invites you to meet the one person you spent a lifetime avoiding. You're whole, undivided self. The world stops being a battlefield and becomes a mirror reflecting not your wounds, but your readiness to heal. A subtle yet undeniable transformation happens when you feel safe within. Not safe because life is predictable, people are always kind, but safe because you no longer abandon yourself in the face of pain. This is one of the clearest signs integration is unfolding. When the storm arrives, instead of fleeing, you remain present, remain with yourself, and offer the same comfort you once begged the world to give you. This inner safety isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of a self that can hold it. Much of life, we're taught our emotions are too much, sadness is inconvenient, anger dangerous, fear weakness. We internalize this early. When intensity arises, we recoil. We numb, distract, perform. We flee our inner experience as if it's a threat. In doing so, we fracture the parts of ourselves carrying the greatest emotional weight. The child who cried in secret, the teenager who screamed silently, become strangers. We feel insecure, not because the world is cruel, but because we no longer know how to be with ourselves when the world hurts. Healing changes this. Healing through integration isn't about constant peace or happiness. It's about building the capacity to remain with whatever arises. It's about turning toward the trembling parts of yourself instead of pushing them away. The first time you do this, truly do this, you'll feel it in your bones. Panic rises, but instead of old escape routes, you stay. You breathe, listen, place a hand on your heart, speak to yourself with a kindness you once sought from others. You're creating your inner world. You're becoming the witness, protector, caregiver of your own psyche. This changes everything. Pain comes, you don't project it outward, collapse in shame, or pretend it's not there. You say, yes, this hurts, but I'm here and I won't abandon you. This isn't a display of strength, it's strength in its truest form. Gentle, steady, rooted in presence. This inner safety allows emotional honesty previously too threatening. You can tell the truth about what you feel, not because someone else approves, but because you do. You're no longer at war with yourself. You don't need to choose between parts of you. The part that wants to be embraced and the part that wants to flee can both exist. The brave part and the terrified part both have a place. You, now conscious, now integrated, become the one who holds that table together. This safety is quiet. It doesn't always announce itself, but you'll feel it in how you speak to yourself in the dark. When you make a mistake and don't berate yourself, when you grieve and don't rush to fix it, when you're afraid yet can still take the next step. It's not perfection, it's presence. Not control, it's care. This presence changes relationships. You no longer seek people to complete you. You don't demand others regulate your emotional world. You don't expect the outside to provide what you now cultivate within. This doesn't make you cold or self-sufficient. It makes you more available for genuine connection because you're not clinging or performing. You show up as someone who can be with themselves and therefore be with others more honestly. Yes, old patterns will return, days when you feel fragile or overwhelmed and the urge to abandon yourself is strong. But you'll notice something new. Even when you fall, you don't fall as far. Even when you falter, you return more quickly. You remember you're not alone, not because someone else saves you, but because you've become a steady presence for yourself. You learn your emotions aren't dangerous, they're invitations. They ask not to be solved, but witnessed. The soul rests not by extinguishing pain, but by becoming a home that can contain it. You become the sanctuary you were seeking, not abstractly, but in the daily quiet act of being with yourself, without judgment, without exile. Healing isn't a destination, it's a homecoming, a return to wholeness, a return to the self that was never truly broken, only waiting to be embraced. And when that self is finally met with unwavering presence, you realize this is what it means to feel. There's a quiet turning point in the healing journey, a subtle shift where the past loses its stranglehold. You're no longer wrestling with ghosts, flinching from memories, or bristling at the roles you were forced to play. It's not about forgetting or pretending the hurt didn't happen, but rather releasing your identity's hostage to those wounds. The past, unprocessed, is a backpack full of bricks we lug around, unconsciously shaping our choices, reactions, and perceptions. We think we're moving forward, but our internal compass spins wildly on the faulty bearings of unfinished stories and survival strategies we've outgrown. Fighting the past, trying to outrun, deny, or obliterate it only keeps it in the driver's seat. The miracle unfolds when we finally stop fighting. We see the past not as the enemy, but as the raw material of who we're becoming. Our culture wrongly equates healing with erasing pain, rewriting history, or finding some perfect redemptive arc. True integration is far humbler, far more powerful. It's saying, yes, this happened, and it's a part of me. It means reclaiming the shadows as well as the light, the moments of powerlessness, the compromises we made for love, the choices born of fear, confusion, or unmet needs. These aren't blemishes on our souls, they're thresholds. When we dare to cross them, not with bitterness but with reverence, they become the very foundation of our wholeness. Making peace with the past isn't condoning wrongdoing. It's refusing to remain captive to it. Every wound carries a message, every heartbreak a lesson, every silence a scream for recognition. When you truly listen, even the most painful memories begin to whisper instead of shout. They no longer scream for revenge or escape. They reveal truths you're finally ready to understand. You realize you weren't the villain you believed yourself to be. You were surviving, adapting, doing the best you could with what you had. The same goes for those who hurt you. They were doing the best they knew how, often projecting their own wounds. This isn't about excusing their behavior, but about releasing the need for them to be evil for your pain to be justified. You abandoned the fantasy that if they'd been different, you'd be whole. You embody the truth. You are whole now because you stopped abandoning any part of your journey. As this inner reconciliation deepens, the story you tell yourself transforms. You're no longer the broken one, the lost one, the one who was never enough. You're the one who lived, persevered, and chose to build something sacred from the ruins. This isn't a performance, a manufactured identity, but the natural outcome of embracing the rejected and saying, "You belong to me." The past becomes a teacher, a mirror, sometimes even a friend. You draw strength from the very things that once weakened you. The memory of what you carried isn't about pride or pity, but a quiet, profound respect for your own soul. A respect that asks only to be honored. By honoring it, you stop running from your story. You begin to live it fully, embracing its messy, unpredictable path. There will be times when old wounds ache, when the past feels close again, when sadness or anger erupts seemingly from nowhere, but you now possess the inner capacity to meet those moments without collapsing. You greet the returning pain not as a regression, but an invitation, another layer to be seen, another truth to be loved. Each time you do this, your sense of self expands. You become less defined by what happened and more by how you chose to face it. Healing isn't a return to who you were before the pain. It's an emergence into who you are because of it. Not in spite of it, not beyond it, but because you turned toward it and wove it into the fabric of your becoming. You took the shards and shaped them into something whole. You know you're healing when the past no longer defines your limits, but reveals your depth. A beautiful sign of integration is when your life begins to move, not from fear or injury, but from inner alignment. This shift isn't sudden, it's quiet, subtle, sometimes hard to notice at first. Then one day, you find yourself saying no without guilt, choosing rest instead of rushing, speaking a truth you once swallowed. You sense a quiet hum deep in your chest. Something has changed. You're no longer acting out a life others wrote for you. You're starting to live from within. For too long, we navigated life based on others' expectations or the defenses we built to protect ourselves. We said yes to be liked, even when we meant no. We stayed silent to avoid conflict, even when something inside was screaming to be heard. We assumed roles not because they fit, but because they made sense in an environment where our truth felt dangerous or unwanted. Slowly, we forgot who we were, not because we never knew, but because we buried that knowing under years of survival. Healing through integration returns you to that original knowing, not as an idea, but as an experience. You begin to sense what feels true in your body, what resonates in your heart, what aligns with that quiet voice inside, once drowned out by the noise. Instead of dismissing it, you trust it. You make choices not to prove or avoid, but because they reflect what matters to you. This is the shift from reaction to authenticity, from protection to expression. It doesn't mean fear or doubt vanish, but fear is no longer the loudest voice in the room. You recognize it not as a command, but a signal. It might still whisper, "What if you fail? What if they leave you? What if you're wrong?" But you can hear those questions and still choose to move forward because something deeper has taken root. A self that no longer needs external validation to feel worthy. A self that no longer equates safety with silence. The signs of this inner alignment are often quiet. You enjoy solitude not because you're avoiding people, but because you've become good company to yourself. You stop chasing those who don't see you, not because you don't care, but because you've stopped needing to convince others of your worth. You create, speak, build, and move, not to be accepted, but because you feel compelled from within. And even when others don't understand, you don't abandon yourself. You understand not everyone will resonate with your path, and that's no longer a threat, but a truth you can live with peacefully. There comes a point when you look at the person you used to be, the over-explainer, the over-apologizer, the overcompensator, and you feel not shame, but tenderness. You see how hard that version of you tried to belong, to be safe, to be loved. You thank her because she got you here. You don't erase her. You simply transcend the need to live as her. You carry her folded gently into your evolving self. Living with alignment isn't about having it all figured out. It's about being willing to listen inwardly repeatedly. It's about recognizing when something's off and having the courage to investigate. It's choosing integrity over image, truth over comfort, and wholeness over approval. These aren't always easy choices. They may cost relationships, family roles, even certain dreams. But what they give you in return is invaluable. A life that is truly your own. The profound joy of integration lies not in perfection, but in presence. It's waking up and knowing your choices aren't governed by fear, guilt, or the need to please. It's feeling the rhythm of your own truth guiding you moment by moment. It's no longer needing to split yourself in two to be accepted. You trust that even if others don't understand, even if the path is uncertain, your internal compass is strong enough to carry you. This isn't the end of your healing. It's the beginning of living. Living as someone who no longer hides parts of themselves to fit into small spaces. Living as someone who can carry their past, their pain, their dreams, and their doubts within an expansive self. Living as someone who moves with clarity, not because they're always right, but because they're always in conversation with their soul. And that, above all, is the gift of integration, not just to survive, but to live from the center of who you are. If this resonated, if you recognize the quiet signs of your own healing or long for that inner alignment, commit to yourself today. Start by pausing, listening, turning inward instead of outward. Ask yourself not what others need from you, but what your soul needs now. Let this be the beginning of your return to wholeness. Start with one choice that honors your truth, one sentence you're afraid to say, one feeling you've been running from. Let each small act be a vow to your healing. You don't need to do it perfectly, only honestly. The path is already within you. Trust the direction it points.